I'm curious, did you ever look at the evidence that we accumulated, the bank statements, the wire transfers, the emails between the bank examiners who, prior to filing the suspicious activity report, stated that, this was an investment company with no investment, or in other words, a shell company. Did you ever look at those bank statements and wire transfers and read the final report from the Biden influence peddling investigation?
I certainly did, yeah.
So, do you still stand by the statement that there was no evidence that the Biden family was influence peddling, that that Hunter Biden took $5 million from China, even though Joe Biden said he didn't in the debate, that there was no money taken from China, that there was, and I'm not even talking about the energy company in Ukraine, because that was the most legitimate thing that Hunter Biden did. I'm talking about Burisma. I'm not even talking about Burisma. I'm talking about the wires that we identified from Romania, the wires from China, the wires from Russia, the gifts from, was it Kazakhstan? Did you look at that? I mean, because that's pretty hard evidence that the Bidens were, at least the president's son, was involved in a pretty concerning influence peddling scheme. And according to the Irish whistleblowers, they never paid taxes on it, which would suggest that they could owe at least $10 million in taxes. So I just wondered, I mean, you have a checking account, correct?
I do.
And you look at your bank statement each month and you can understand it. I'm curious, do you stand by, because there were a lot of, you did a lot of interviews and I did a lot of interviews, and I feel like we were, saying totally opposite things. And, you look at how this all ended. Were you surprised that Joe Biden pardoned his son?
I was surprised because he had previously stated he was not going to.
Were you surprised that Joe Biden pardoned his entire family?
I was surprised by that.
Would you admit that that's an admission of guilt, that Joe Biden pardoned his entire family? Because the only reason, the only time the spouses were ever mentioned in anything was in our investigation when we subpoenaed the bank records and we traced the money laundering, and it included, the spouses were involved in some of the pass-throughs. I mean, that's a pretty amazing thing. In Joe Biden's last act as president, right before they transfer the power, all our phones start lighting up that he pardoned his entire family. And I just wonder if, at the end of this, the investigation's over, do you stand by the countless statements that you made that said there was no evidence of wrongdoing by the Biden family?
Respectfully, my job and role was to respond to the investigation, which became an impeachment investigation of the president, as obviously you know. And
it was an impeachment inquiry, but go ahead.
Sure. And my job was to respond to allegations that were made about the president, whether he had, been involved in something illegal, wrong, or whether he had governing decisions that have been impacted by these sorts of things. And of course, over the course of that entire investigation, my view, the view of the president, view of his team, my job as a spokesman to communicate it, was that none of this evidence amounted to what I think the end goal of the investigation, the official investigation, was to serve. I can't speak for Hunter Biden. I can't speak for the president's family members. Mm-hmm. Those were personal individuals who had their own representatives who we did refer questions and stuff to. And so, their own personal dealings is not something that was part of my job as a spokesman at the White House.
Did President Biden assure you that he never committed a crime? Do you recall ever having a conversation with President Biden where he assured you he never committed a crime?
I did not have a meeting with President Biden where that was said and that was discussed.
You mentioned that you spoke with Abby Lowell. Do you recall how many times you spoke with Abby Lowell?
the best of my recollection, 2, 3, 4 times maybe.
Was the Abbey Lowell's law firm, were they sending you talking points as to how to combat some of the things that we would release?
No.
Okay.
And when there were allegations, I mentioned this earlier, when there were allegations that were just about Hunter and Hunter's activities, my job, I would refer those to Hunter and his personal representatives, because my job was about the president and his decisions and his him individually, not his family members.
Oh.
One final question, then we can go through it. Do you recall any conversations about Hunter being a legal liability to the president?
I don't recall conversations about Hunter being a legal liability for the president. Obviously, Hunter's legal issues, is my understanding, weighed heavily on the president.
What about conversations about him being a political liability on the president?
I certainly can generally recall that at times there were conversations that some of these public visibility of Hunter, could be, not great for the president, something like that.
Yeah. Thank you. You can go there.
Indicted on allegations he was an agent for China. I'd like to introduce as Exhibit C a Politico article from March 20th, 2024, titled House GOP's latest impeachment hearing devolves into bickering with Trump-aligned witness. The subtitle on this article is Tony Bobulinski repeatedly sparred with Democrats on the Oversight Committee and called President Joe Biden a quote serial laughter. And then I'm going to introduce as Exhibit D a screenshot of a tweet that I believe came from you, Mr. Sands, that states, reminder, last week Republicans hyped Tony Bobulinski as a quote star witness in their discredited impeachment. Comer insists he was quote credible, but the Daily Beast exposed his deep ties to a Russian oligarch, quote, who's been a close ally of Putin for decades. This is a retweet of an article in the Daily Beast titled GOP star witness and Hunter Biden probe has ties to Russian oligarch. Mr. Sands, I would represent to you that during their 15-month investigation into Hunter Biden and into Joe Biden's involvement in any of Hunter Biden's business dealings, or potential involvement, I should say, Oversight Committee Republicans heard more than 80 hours of testimony from nearly 20 witnesses and reviewed more than 100,000 pages of documents. Does that sound approximately correct to your recollection?
That does.
I will also represent to you that last Congress Chairman Comer made sweeping claims that Joe Biden had engaged in impeachable conduct while in office. Does that also sound generally correct to your recollection?
Yes.
Mr. Sands, did the House of Representatives vote to impeach President Joe Biden during the 118th Congress?
I don't believe so.
They did not, that's correct. Would you consider Chairman Comer's impeachment investigation a success, personally?
I think it's hard to characterize it that if it doesn't end in an impeachment.
I will say that many Republicans categorized it as a failure. I'm going to introduce as an exhibit E, I believe we're on, a Washington Examiner article titled Republicans Exhausted with Comer's, quote, complete failure to deliver on promise to impeach Biden report. I was wondering if you would be willing to read for me the last paragraph on the first page of this article, which continues briefly onto the second page.
Is this the source close?
No, it should start with James Comer continues.
It says, quote, James Comer continues to embarrass himself and House Republicans, end quote, a source close to GOP leadership told the Messenger. Quote, he screws up over and over and over. I don't know how Republicans actually impeach the president based on his clueless investigation and lack of leadership, end quote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sands.
Thank you, Mr. Sands. The majority in your questions earlier repeatedly cited President Biden's, misremembering of days after a long interview, and like you said, Mike, some that's his recollection. Do you know who appointed Jay Powell as chair of the Federal Reserve?
I believe it was President Trump.
Yes, and so Mr. President Trump also did not remember that he appointed Jay Powell. He earlier this year said that he was surprised that Jay Powell had been appointed as Fed chair. Did you also know that President Trump once stated at a deposition that a woman named Aide was his ex-wife, Marilyn Maple?
I did not know that.
And in 2019, President Trump also had a special counsel investigation into Russian interference with the 2016 election. And he said over 30 times that he did not remember to question the query. So it seems that you would say that President Trump also has also an ability to remember certain things after.
Yeah. My sense is that it's fairly common for people who are being interviewed, if they can't remember something, say they don't remember